guy was super creepy.
Leishi 25-man Heroic is a one-phase boss with a number of abilities that he'll cast periodically and in random orders. This boss is similar to bosses like Shah of Iran and Karazhan, where you can't really expect a specific order of the boss on a fight-to-fight basis, but as long as you understand the various things he can do, you just gotta react as he does them, form the mechanic, and move on in time. That being said, the boss has somewhat of a default position that he'll go to between these random sets of abilities, and in this base form, he's tanked with a regular threat table. However, the tanks cannot stand on each other because he casts an ability called Spray. Spray is an ability he will spam constantly on his threat target, and it will splash onto anyone within 2.5 yards of that player. For every time a spray is cast on that target, a stacking debuff builds to that a player and those around him that increases damage taken by Frost, which is the primary damage element of the fight, by 1% per stack for 10 seconds. Because of this, the tanks cannot stand on each other because they're going to be taunt swapping once each individual's stacks build up to a point, which becomes unsafe. In addition, this base form has a heroic-only ability called Scary Fog, and what this does is that it's a stacking debuff on all players who are not within 10 yards of the boss's hitbox, and this debuff lasts 35 seconds. This debuff adds a stacking Shadow Rot per stack applied on a player, but as a benefit, it causes friendly and hostiles around this debuffed player to take an increased 10% damage per stack, 10 yards range. So during this base phase, we'll have a set of 2 to 3 people in a permanent rotation where one at a time will go out into the fog, so be on 10 yards from the boss's radius, collect enough of the debuff to be useful, and then come in and stand by themselves but close enough that they're affecting the boss with the damage intake increase. And while one player is applying this debuff on the boss, the other is outside of the fog range, building up their debuff for their turn in the rotation. The first of his random abilities is called Getaway, where the boss will tally from wherever he is to the middle of the platform and start channeling a wind pushback ability for 30 seconds. When this is happening, raiders will have to push inward to the center of the map to stop from being knocked off the platform, but also there's a damage reduction buff when moving towards the center. We're also able to break this pushback early by doing at least 4% damage to the boss while this pushback is occurring. So it's going to be very important that raiders are comfortable dealing with this movement pushback while also outputting damage with instance or clever uses of movement abilities plus short, quick casts of spells. The next of his special abilities is called Hide. When he does Hide, he will become invisible and still cast Spray, which is the thing that he casts on the tanks, except for now it will be cast randomly amongst the raiders. Therefore, when he becomes invisible, it's very important that everyone immediately spreads to avoid having Spray be applied onto multiple people. To break out of Hide, we have to start casting around us AoE abilities, and we'll get signals to suggest if we're close to the boss. When the boss has successfully been hit by AoEs somewhere invisible in the map space that we can use, he'll become visible and tankable just like before. The boss has 2 things that are related to his current health percentage. The first is called Afraid, and it simply increases his cast speed the lower his health is. Specifically, every time they lose 10% of their health, their casting speed increases by 8%. This translates into that he's going to be casting Spray faster and faster and faster throughout the whole fight. So it's going to be very important that tanks adjust their timings for taunt swaps based on this increasing rate of Spray attacks, which will apply debuffs faster, which will then mean taunt swaps have to be quicker. Finally, every 20% of his life, 80, 60, 40, 20, the boss will shield himself and become immune, and then spawn several elementals with normal threat tables per elemental. The first 2 times he does this at 80 and 60%, there will be 3 elementals. And the last time he does this at 40 and 20%, there will be 4 elementals. These elementals do heavy melee attacks, but do no abilities. But the good news is they are fully CCable. This elemental add phase completely stops when the first elemental is killed. So the tanks are going to quickly mark one elemental that they're going to tank and we're going to kill as quickly as possible, and all the other elementals must be CC'd. So to summarize, by default, there'll be 2 tanks who are separated so they don't share their sprays. The raid will stay in very specific positions so that we can expose one side so that scary fog people can build up their fog and come into the boss where they can safely apply the debuff onto the boss but not other people. The boss will sporadically get away where we have to resist his wind burst, hide where we have to spread out and break him with our AoE, and every 20% of his life he'll despawn, will kill one ad and CC the others, and return back to his base phase.